Welcome to Galactic Nova Stories, where cosmic emotions come to life. Your journey begins now. The silver craft descended silently through Earth's atmosphere, its hull refracting sunlight into prismatic patterns. Inside, Mira adjusted the settings on her neural translator and reviewed her mission parameters one final time. As a linguistic specialist for the Lumeri Exploration Initiative, she was tasked with studying humanity's verbal communication methods, a fascinating oddity to her telepathic species. "Prepare for landfall," announced the ship's pilot through shared mindspace. "Remember protocol, minimize emotional contamination," Mira acknowledged with a mental pulse. The Lumeri had observed humans for decades before initiating contact. Their assessment, an intelligent species hampered by inefficient communication and chaotic emotional states. Yet humans had accomplished remarkable feats despite these limitations. Understanding this paradox was her assignment. The landing site, a research facility outside a mid-sized city, bustled with activity. Humans in uniform moved with purpose, their faces animated in ways that made Mira's pale blue skin prickle with curiosity. Unlike her kind, smooth features and large pupilless eyes, humans were expressive creatures, their emotions bleeding through every gesture. "Welcome to Earth Research Exchange," said a tall woman in formal attire. "I'm Director Reeves. Your cultural liaison is waiting inside." Mira inclined her head slightly, the Lumeri equivalent of acknowledgement. Her translator captured and processed the verbal sounds, though it struggled with the emotional undertones Reeves projected. Inside the facility, a man sat at an oddly shaped wooden object, his fingers moving across it to produce sound patterns. Mira stopped transfixed. The vibrations seemed to bypass her translator, resonating directly in her chest cavity. The man looked up, fingers stilling. "Oh, hello there, I'm Eli." He stood, extending a hand in the human greeting ritual. "I'll be helping you navigate our messy human culture." Mira studied him. Average height for a human male, with features her briefing would classify as friendly. She touched his hand briefly, noting the unusual warmth and the inexplicable data transfer that seemed to occur on contact. "I am Mira, linguistic specialist, third rank." She tried forming the words with her mouth, rather than relying on her translator's output. The attempt produced a slightly musical quality that made Eli smile. "What was that?" she asked, pointing. "To the wooden object. A piano, it's a musical instrument." Seeing her confusion, he added, "Music is, well, it's how we express things that words can't capture." "Inefficient," Mira observed. "Telepathic exchange is precise." Eli laughed, a sound her translator couldn't properly interpret. "That's exactly why I volunteered for this position. You folks are all about efficiency and logic. We humans are messy, emotional, and yes, sometimes inefficient. But there's beauty in that chaos." Mira tilted her head. "Beauty is subjective, not quantifiable." "Exactly." Eli's eyes lit up in a way that created an unusual flutter in Mira's biorhythms. "That's what makes us human." As they toured the facility, Mira observed Eli interacting with others. Each exchange contained layers of information her translator flagged as emotional context, but couldn't decode. Humans didn't just exchange data, they shared something more. Later in her quarters, Mira reported to her superiors. Human communication contains substantial non-telepathic elements requiring further study. Their reliance on emotional context appears not to be a limitation, as previously theorized, but a different system altogether. She didn't mention the strange resonance she'd felt when Eli produced the music. Such subjective observations had no place in Lumeri reports. Yet as she entered rest cycle, those vibrations echoed in her memory centers, triggering responses her species rarely experienced. First contact had been established, but Mira sensed she'd barely begun to understand. Mira stood at the edge of the outdoor gathering, recording data as humans interacted in what Eli called a community festival. 3 weeks into her mission, and humanity remained an exquisite puzzle. The Lumeri understood language as information transfer, precise, efficient, and straightforward. But humans wrapped their communications in layers of meaning that defied her translator's capabilities. "Having fun?" Eli appeared beside her, offering a cup of something steaming. Fun is not an objective of this observation. She accepted the cup anyway, noting how the warm vapor created pleasant sensations. What is happening there? She pointed to where humans moved rhythmically to sound vibrations produced by a small group with instruments. Dancing, Eli said. It's how we physically express ourselves to music. Express what? Joy, connection, sometimes sadness or longing. He watched her reaction carefully. Don't the Lumeri have anything like this? Mira considered. We have ceremonial movements for traditional purposes, but they convey specific meanings, not feelings. Eli tilted his head. So your species doesn't feel emotions. We evolved beyond emotional responses. They were deemed inefficient for a telepathic species. Even as she said it, Mira felt something strange, a sense that this explanation was somehow incomplete. Beyond emotions, Eli echoed, sipping his drink. That sounds lonely. The concept of loneliness didn't translate well. We are never alone. All Lumeri remain connected to the mind space. Connected but not truly together, Eli mused. There's a difference between sharing thoughts and sharing feelings. Before Mira could respond, music swelled from the performing group. The sounds vibrated through her sensory receptors, creating ripples in her neural pathways. Unbidden, her hand moved slightly to the rhythm. Eli noticed. You feel it, don't you? The music. I detect the vibrations, she acknowledged, uncomfortable with the implications. Over the next several days, Mira expanded her observations beyond the research facility. She watched children play in parks, couples walk hand in hand, elderly humans sit together in comfortable silence. Each scene contained data her reports couldn't properly categorize. During an evening observation session at what Eli called a coffee shop, Mira finally asked the question that had been forming in her mind. What is love? Eli nearly spilled his drink. That's quite a question. My observations indicate this concept is central to human experience, yet it appears contradictory. Humans describe it as both pleasurable and painful, logical and irrational, necessary yet dangerous. Eli considered her question seriously. Love is when someone else's happiness becomes essential to your own. It's choosing someone, again and again, even when it's difficult. Mira processed this. A voluntary biological imperative. It's more than biology, Eli said gently. It's connection at the deepest level, something worth risking everything for. The concept created a strange disturbance in Mira's thought patterns, like attempting to translate a word that had no equivalent in her language. Later that night, Mira received a transmission from her superiors concerning patterns detected in your neural scans. Possible contamination from prolonged human contact. Provide full report on any anomalous experiences. She hesitated before responding. For the first time, Mira chose not to share everything. The way music made her feel, how Eli's laughter created resonance in her chest cavity, the strange warmth that came when their hands accidentally touched. These observations she kept to herself. Something was changing inside her, something both frightening and fascinating. Your neural patterns show significant deviation from baseline, stated the Lumeri physician, through the secure communication channel. The pale figure on Mira's screen shared none of her growing fascination with humanity. We are concerned about contamination. I remain fully functional, Mira replied, maintaining the even tone expected of her kind. My observations of human communication methods are yielding valuable insights. Your latest reports contain subjective elements. This is unacceptable. The physician's voice carried no emotion, yet the disapproval was clear. Perhaps we should reassign you. After the communication ended, Mira stood at her window watching rain fall, another Earth phenomenon that triggered unexpected responses in her neural pathways. The rhythmic patter against glass created patterns her mind found oddly soothing. Knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Eli stood there, water droplets clinging to his hair, holding what appeared to be a protective covering. Thought you might want to experience rain properly, he said, unfolding the device she now recognized as an umbrella. Some things can't be understood just by watching. Minutes later, they stood under a large tree in the facility's courtyard, partially sheltered from the rainfall. Mira extended her hand beyond the umbrella's protection, feeling droplets strike her skin. "The water cycle is simple physics," she said, "yet humans attribute emotional significance to rain." "We attribute emotional significance to everything," Eli laughed. "It's our superpower and our curse." Superpower? The translator struggled. "With the concept. It's what drives us. Logic can tell you how to do something, but emotion tells you why it matters." Eli watched her expression carefully. "The Lumeri are far more advanced technologically, but I wonder if you've missed something important by eliminating emotion from your experience." The question lingered between them as they walked through the gentle rainfall. Mira's sensors detected microscopic changes in her biochemistry, shifts that would alarm her superiors if reported. Over the following days, Eli introduced Mira to experiences designed to evoke emotional responses. A sunset, viewed from a mountaintop, the taste of chocolate, the sound of ocean waves, and most significantly, more music. "Close your eyes," he instructed during one such session, placing small devices over her auditory receptors. "Just listen." The composition began softly, a single instrument creating a pattern that grew increasingly complex as others joined. Mira felt vibrations travel through her neural network, creating connections where none had existed before. Images formed unbidden in her mind, not memories, but something new her brain was creating in response to the sounds. "What are you experiencing?" Eli asked when the music ended. Mira struggled to find words. "The vibrations create resonance, like telepathy, but different. It communicates without specific data transfer." "That's it exactly," Eli said, excitement evident in his voice. "Music doesn't tell you what to feel. It creates space for you to feel something of your own." That night, Mira's report to her superiors was notably brief. When asked about her experiences with human music, she replied only, "The vibrations serve communication purposes still under analysis." The truth that music had awakened something within her that felt ancient and new simultaneously remained private. Such an admission would certainly result in her immediate recall. 2 days later, her fears materialized in a different form. Day-priority communication arrived. A Lumeri oversight team was en route to Earth to evaluate her research and ensure she hadn't been compromised by human influence. Eli found her staring at the notification. "Bad news?" my superior's question. "My objectivity." Mira hesitated, then added, "They may not be incorrect." Eli sat beside her, closer than Lumeri protocols would permit. "Because you're beginning to understand us." "Because I'm beginning to feel," she answered, the admission both frightening and liberating, "and I don't know how to stop." "Try again," Eli encouraged, guiding Mira's fingers back to the correct position on the simple flute he'd brought. "Don't think about it too technically. Feel the air passing through." Mira tried once more, producing a wavering note that hung in the air between them. They sat in a quiet corner of the facility's garden, hidden from the casual observer. For 2 weeks, these secret music lessons had become their ritual, a small rebellion against the Lumeri oversight team that had arrived 3 days ago. "Better," Eli smiled. "You're getting it." "It is inefficient," Mira observed, examining the flute. "My species abandoned physical instruments millennia ago in favor of direct neural sound synthesis." "But can synthetic sound do this?" Eli took the flute and played a simple melody. The notes seemed to bypass Mira's translator entirely, creating ripples of something warm and unfamiliar inside her chest. "No," she admitted quietly. "Our synthesized sounds convey information, not this." "This," Eli said, returning the flute, "to her is what makes music universal. It doesn't just transmit data, it creates experience." The oversight team had been thorough in their investigation, interviewing facility staff and scrutinizing Mira's research. Led by senior observer Tail, they viewed human emotional expression as a curious evolutionary dead end, interesting to study, but ultimately irrelevant to advanced consciousness. "Your reports lack sufficient objective analysis," tale had told her during yesterday's evaluation. You spend excessive time on human creative expressions rather than focusing on communication efficiencies. Their creative expressions are central to their communication, Mira had argued, feeling an unfamiliar heat in her face. To understand one, we must understand both. Tyle's expression had remained impassive. We detect concerning patterns in your neural activity, possible contamination. Now sitting in the garden with Eli, Mira realized something fundamental had changed within her. The Lumeri valued knowledge as dispassionate observation, understanding without being changed by what was understood. Yet here she was, transformed by her subject of study. When Eli's hand briefly covered hers to adjust her grip on the flute, sensory data cascaded through her neural pathways. The translator couldn't process it, but something deeper and more ancient in her brain could. The oversight team believes I am becoming compromised, she confessed. Eli's expression darkened. Because you're learning to appreciate things they can't understand? Because I'm experiencing emotions our species engineered away centuries ago. Mira placed the flute down carefully. They see it as regression. I see it as evolution, Eli countered. Maybe emotions weren't a mistake to be corrected. Maybe they're essential to truly understanding the universe. That evening, Mira submitted her scheduled report to Lumeri Command. Rather than the expected analysis, she included audio recordings, children laughing, rainfall on leaves, and most daringly, her own halting attempt at playing the flute. The response was immediate and severe. A formal recall order citing critical neural contamination and ordering her immediate return for comprehensive recalibration. When she shared this with Eli, his reaction surprised her. They can't recalibrate what they don't understand, he said, taking her hands in his, a gesture that would have repulsed her weeks ago, but now felt essential. We need to show them what you've discovered. How? Mira asked. The oversight team rejects emotional expression as primitive. Then we'll speak in a language beyond words. Eli's eyes held a determination that created yet another unfamiliar sensation in Mira's chest. I'll compose something, a piece that captures what's happening between our worlds, between us. Music won't change centuries of Lumeri thought, Mira cautioned. Maybe not, Eli acknowledged, but it might remind them of what they've lost. As they parted that night, Mira found herself facing an impossible choice: return to her people and lose these new experiences forever, or defy everything she had known to preserve what she had only just begun to discover. For the first time, logic alone couldn't guide her decision. The Lumeri transport vessel would arrive in 72 hours. Mira watched Earth's sun rise from her quarters, the golden light creating patterns on her skin that seemed to mirror the turmoil within. Before coming to Earth, decisions had been simple calculations of efficiency and protocol. Now every choice felt weighted with something her people had no name for. Her door chimed softly. Eli stood there, eyes shadowed from what humans called a sleepless night, clutching a data crystal in one hand. "May I enter?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically formal. Inside, he placed the crystal into her console. "I finished it. The piece I promised." Music filled the room, not the simple melodies he had taught her, but something far more complex. It began with a single repeating pattern that reminded Mira of Lumeri communication tones, precise and measured. Gradually, human instruments entered, creating harmonies and counterpoints that transformed the original sequence into something neither fully Lumeri nor fully human. Mira closed her eyes, allowing the vibrations to pass through her neural pathways without analysis. The music seemed to bypass her translator entirely, speaking directly to something awakening inside her. "What is it called?" she asked when the final notes faded. "First contact," Eli replied, watching her carefully. "It's how I see us. 2. Worlds colliding, creating something new." The oversight team would classify this as dangerous emotional manipulation. "And what do you classify it as?" Mira hesitated, then answered with a word her translator had never before produced from her vocal apparatus. "Beautiful." Eli moved closer, his human warmth creating ripples in her biofield. "Mira, I know the Lumeri don't believe in connections between individuals, but what's happening between us is unprecedented, she finished, experiencing a sensation her species had engineered away generations ago. Vulnerability. And forbidden. Only because they don't understand it. His hand found hers, fingers interlacing. Your people value knowledge above all else, right? How can they reject something they haven't even tried to understand? Tael's voice interrupted from the doorway. Because some knowledge is dangerous, human. They turned to find the oversight team leader watching them, his expression impossibly neutral despite the censure in his voice. Senior observer, Mira acknowledged, instinctively withdrawing her hand from Eli's, yet feeling a curious reluctance in doing so. Your departure has been accelerated, Teal announced. The transport arrives tomorrow. Your replacement has already been selected. You can't just take her, Eli protested. She's made breakthrough discoveries about communication between our species. She has become contaminated by emotional interference, Tael countered. A regrettable outcome we will correct. After Tael departed, silence stretched between them. The music crystal still projected its final note, suspended in the air like a question. They'll erase everything, Mira finally said. All I've experienced, all I've felt. Unless you choose differently. Ooze. Eli's voice carried an urgency she'd never heard before. The Lumeri respect choice, don't they? Individual autonomy? Within acceptable parameters, Mira answered. This situation falls outside those parameters. Eli's expression hardened with determination. Then we need to change the parameters. That night, as the facility slept, Mira made an unprecedented decision. Using her access codes, she transmitted Eli's composition to the Lumeri cultural database with an attached message. A new form of communication discovered. Requires experiential understanding. She knew the consequences would be severe. The oversight team would view it as deliberate contamination of the collective mind space. Yet something stronger than fear drove her now. Something the humans called hope. When dawn broke, Mira didn't report for pre-departure preparations. Instead, she sat with Eli in the garden where they'd practiced music, waiting for whatever would come next. Are you afraid? He asked. Fear is an emotional response, she answered automatically, then smiled. Another new expression she'd learned. From humans. Yes, I'm afraid, but I'm also something else. What? Mira considered, then found the word her translator had been unable to provide until now. Alive. The Lumeri retrieval team arrived at dawn. 6 tall, silvery figures, whose expressionless faces betrayed nothing of their purpose. They moved with perfect coordination through the research facility, their presence creating ripples of unease among the human staff. Director Reeves met them in the main atrium, her posture deliberately casual despite the tension evident in her voice. This is highly irregular. Cultural exchanges operate under mutual agreements. You can't simply extract your personnel without consultation. The lead retriever, identified only as Nexus, responded with characteristic Lumeri precision. Specialist. Mira has experienced critical neural contamination, requiring immediate intervention. This supersedes diplomatic protocols. Eli watched from the observation deck, heart pounding. After Mira's act of rebellion, transmitting his composition to the Lumeri cultural database, they had expected consequences, but not this show of force. They're afraid, Mira said quietly beside him. Something they would never admit. Afraid. Of what? Eli asked, not taking his eyes off the scene below. Of change, of discovering their evolutionary path might have sacrificed something essential. Her hand found his, a gesture that would have been unthinkable when she first arrived. Your music is spreading through the mind space. Some are experiencing it. Below, Director Reeves was losing the diplomatic battle. The retrieval team had produced documentation citing obscure clauses in the exchange agreement that gave them authority to remove compromised assets. Eli's communicator buzzed. On the screen, dozens of messages flashed from facility staff and even civilians from the nearby town. Word had spread about what was happening. They're coming, he told Mira. People want to help. Her eyes widened. Why would humans involve themselves in Lumeri affairs? Because that's what humans do when someone we care about is threatened. Eli squeezed her hand. We've got about 20 minutes before they take you to their transport. That's our window. What happened next would later be described in Lumeri official records as a multi-sensory disruption event. In human accounts, it would simply be called the concert. As the retrieval team escorted Mira toward the landing pad, they found their path blocked by an impromptu gathering. Facility staff, townspeople, and even curious bystanders had assembled with musical instruments, speakers, and handmade signs bearing messages of unity. At Eli's signal, they began to play, not in perfect harmony, but with passionate intensity. The composition he had created for Mira, now performed by dozens of individuals who had never rehearsed together, filled the air with vibrations that seemed to bend the very light around the Lumeri. Nexus stepped forward. This is interference with official procedure. This is communication, Director Reeves countered, taking a small flute from her pocket and adding her voice to the growing symphony. Isn't that what your mission here was supposed to be about? The Lumeri retrieval team visibly faltered, their normally perfect coordination disrupted by the waves of sound washing over them. Several placed protective hands over their auditory receptors, unused to processing such intense sensory input. Mira stepped forward into the space between her people and the humans. For a moment, she simply stood there, feeling the music flow through her changed neural pathways. Then, to everyone's surprise, she began to sing, a clear tone that wove through the human instruments, creating harmonies where there should have been discord. Eli watched in amazement as several of the retrieval team lowered their hands from their ears. Something was happening to them. Subtle changes in posture, minute shifts in expression. The music was affecting them just as it had affected Mira. Nexus raised a hand, signaling for silence. This display is noted but irrelevant. Specialist. Mira will return for neural recalibration as ordered. And if I refuse? Mira asked, her voice carrying a strength Eli had never heard before. Refusal is not an option, Nexus stated. The contamination has clearly progressed beyond safe parameters. Perhaps, said Mira, stepping closer to her superior. What you call contamination is actually evolution. The word hung in the air between them, dangerous and enticing. Evolution was sacred to the Lumeri, the careful, controlled advancement of their species. To suggest that random emotional experiences could contribute to evolution was heresy. Yet as the music continued around them, something unprecedented occurred. One of the younger retrieval team members began to sway slightly, almost imperceptibly, to the rhythm. Nexus saw it too. His face for the first time showed an emotion recognizable to human observers. Fear. Containment has been breached, he announced, activating his communicator. Prepare for immediate extraction and quarantine protocols. The Lumeri began to retreat toward their vessel, moving with uncharacteristic haste. Only Nexus remained, fixing Mira with an unreadable gaze. You have made your choice, he said simply. Yes, she replied. I have chosen understanding over ignorance, connection over isolation. You have chosen regression, he countered. Then why? Mira asked softly. Are you afraid to let your people experience it? Nexus had no answer. With a final look at the human gathering, he turned and followed his team to the waiting transport. As the silver craft rose into the morning sky, Eli found Mira watching it depart. Her expression complex with emotions, her face was still learning to display. Is it over? He asked. No, she replied, turning to face the humans who had defended her. It's only beginning. 30 days after the retrieval team's retreat, the Lumeri High Council broke centuries of protocol by requesting a direct communication with both Mira and Eli. The facility's central conference room had been prepared with both human and Lumeri sensory equipment, an unprecedented accommodation. They've been listening to your composition, Mira explained as technicians made final adjustments. It spread through the cultural database despite attempts to quarantine it. Eli adjusted his formal attire nervously. Music as a contagion. Not exactly what I had in mind when I composed it. It's more than that, Mira said, her voice carrying new harmonics she'd developed since choosing to remain on Earth. Your music helped them remember something they'd lost. The holographic projector activated, revealing 5 Lumeri Council members seated in a perfect semicircle. Their appearance was typical of their species, tall, with smooth, silvery skin, and large, pupilless eyes, but something about their posture seemed different to Eli, less rigidly composed. The central figure spoke first. "Specialist Mira, human Eli. We acknowledge your presence." Standard Lumeri greeting, yet delivered with subtle inflections that made Mira tilt her head in surprise. "Honorable Council," she responded. "We are grateful for this dialogue." "The situation is unprecedented," continued the councillor. "Our specialists have analyzed the audio composition transmitted to our cultural database. Its effects on neural pathways were unexpected." Eli found himself holding his breath. The council's decision would determine not just Mira's fate, but potentially the future relationship between their species. "Initially, we classified these effects as contamination," another councillor stated. "However, ongoing analysis suggests a different interpretation." Mira stepped forward. "The music activates neural regions our species has suppressed for generations. Regions associated with what humans call emotional processing." "Correct," the central councillor acknowledged. "This raises profound questions about our evolutionary direction." The admission was extraordinary. For centuries, the Lumeri had viewed their elimination of emotional response as progress, the mark of an advanced civilization moving beyond primitive drives. Our preliminary studies indicate the neural patterns activated by this music enhance certain types of problem-solving and creative thinking, continued a third councillor. "This was unanticipated." Eli found his voice. "With respect, councillors, emotions aren't just about problem-solving. They're about connection, to each other, to the universe around us, to ourselves." The council members exchanged glances, a rare display of uncertain consensus. "We request a demonstration," the central figure finally said. "Not through transmission, but direct experience." Eli looked to Mira, who nodded encouragement. He retrieved the small case he'd brought, removing a simple wooden flute. "This instrument is similar to what I taught Mira," he explained. "Its design is ancient on Earth, thousands of years old. Yet it creates sounds that still move us today." He began to play, not the complex composition he'd created previously, but something simpler and more primal. The melody wandered like a question seeking answers, echoing in the chamber designed for perfect acoustic transmission to the Lumeri councillors. As the notes filled the space between worlds, something extraordinary happened. The councillors' rigid postures softened. Several closed their eyes, not in rejection but in deeper reception of the sound. When Eli finished, silence held the room for several heartbeats. "We understand," the central councillor finally said, voice carrying unfamiliar cadences. "This experience changes perspective." "It's only the beginning," Mira said gently. "There is so much more." The impact of that simple demonstration rippled outward in ways neither humans nor Lumeri could have predicted. The council established a new initiative, the Resonance Project, dedicated to studying emotional communication and its potential benefits for Lumeri civilization. Mira was appointed its director, with Eli as human liaison. Their mission to explore how emotional experience might complement rather than contradict the logical foundations of Lumeri society. "They're afraid," Eli observed later, as they walked beneath Earth's moon, silver light reminiscent of Lumeri skin tones, taking their first steps into feeling after centuries of suppression. "Yes," Mira agreed, taking his hand in a gesture that now felt natural. "But they're also curious, and curiosity has always been the Lumeri's greatest strength." She looked up at the stars, knowing her people were watching, listening, perhaps even beginning to feel. "What you've given them, given me, is not weakness," she said softly. "It's completion." For the first time since arriving on Earth, Mira felt truly whole, neither solely Lumeri nor artificially human, but something gloriously, terrifically new. 1 year after the Council's decision, the Earth Research Exchange Facility had transformed. What began as a cautious diplomatic outpost now thrived as the center of a cultural revolution spanning 2 worlds. Additional Lumeri had arrived, scientists, artists, philosophers, each drawn by rumors of what humans called the awakening. In the central garden where Mira had first learned to play the flute, a new structure stood, a crystalline dome designed by Lumeri architects and human acoustic engineers. Inside, the resonance chamber allowed visitors from both species to experience music, art, and emotion in ways previously unimaginable. Eli finished his presentation to the latest group of Lumeri visitors, answering their increasingly nuanced questions about human emotional expression. These weren't the rigid analytical observers of a year ago. Their questions revealed genuine curiosity, even wonder. "Your species fascinates us," said one Lumeri researcher after the others had departed. "You developed advanced technology despite, or perhaps because of, your emotional nature. We always considered emotions inefficient. Now we wonder if efficiency itself has limitations." Eli smiled, recognizing the philosophical shift this represented. "Sometimes the scenic route teaches you more than the direct path." As the researcher departed, Mira entered the chamber. Her appearance had subtly changed over the past year, her movements more fluid, her features more expressive. She wore a small pendant that contained a recording of Eli's original composition, a personal reminder of her transformation. "The High Council's report arrived," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality she had developed. "They've officially recognized emotional intelligence as a valid evolutionary path. The recalibration program has been permanently suspended." Eli's face broke into a grin. "So no more calling it contamination?" "They're calling it complementary consciousness now," Mira replied with a soft laugh, a sound that had once been impossible for her species. "Politics always requires new terminology to accept old wisdom." Together they walked through the facility grounds, where human and Lumeri researchers worked side by side. What had begun as Mira's personal journey had blossomed into something far greater, a bridge between civilizations that complemented rather than competed with each other. In the distance, a transport ship descended, carrying the newest delegation from the Lumeri homeworld. Among them were artists, a concept that would have been contradictory just months ago. "They're calling it the Renaissance," Mira explained. "The first new Lumeri art in over 5 centuries. Music, visual expressions, even dance, all inspired by what began here." "Are they any good?" Eli asked with playful skepticism. "Technically perfect, emotionally awkward," Mira answered. "Like adolescents discovering their voices, but authentic and beautiful because of that authenticity." As evening approached, they made their way to the cliffside overlooking the ocean, where Eli had once taken Mira to experience her first sunset. Her small gathering awaited them, both humans and Lumeri who had been part of their journey. Director Reeves nodded as they approached. "Perfect timing. We're ready when you are." At the center of the gathering stood a curious instrument, part traditional earth piano, part Lumeri sonic resonator. It had been designed by engineers from both worlds, capable of producing sounds neither species could create alone. Eli sat at the instrument, fingers hovering over the keys. Mira stood beside him, her hand lightly touching his shoulder in a gesture that had become natural between them. "1 year ago today," Director Reeves announced to the assembled group, "we witnessed the beginning of something unprecedented, not just contact between different worlds, but understanding between different ways of being." The gathered audience, human and Lumeri alike, listened with shared attention, a unity that once seemed impossible. "To commemorate this anniversary," Reeves continued, "Eli and Mira have created something new, something that belongs to both our worlds." Eli began to play, his hands moving across the hybrid instrument with practiced confidence. The melody carried echoes of his original composition, but evolved into something richer and more complex. Then Mira joined in, her voice providing counterpoint to the music, not with words, but with tones that spoke directly to the heart and mind simultaneously. The sound that emerged existed in the space between Lumeri precision and human passion, between mathematical perfection and beautiful imperfection. It was neither fully human nor fully Lumeri, but something gloriously new. As the final notes faded into the twilight, A Lumeri elder who had initially opposed the entire exchange program rose from her seat. Her voice, when she spoke, carried unfamiliar inflections. "I have existed for 3 centuries," she said. "In that time I have witnessed technological marvels, cosmic phenomena, and the birth of new stars. Yet nothing has moved me like this simple vibration of air molecules." She paused, visibly processing an unfamiliar sensation. "I believe I am experiencing what humans call gratitude." Later that night, as Earth's moon cast silver light across the facility grounds, Mira and Eli sat alone by the ocean side. "The Council has approved expanded exchanges," Mira said. "Hundreds more Lumeri will experience Earth. Hundreds of humans will visit our homeworld. Are your people ready for that much emotion all at once?" Eli asked, only half joking. "Are yours ready for that much logic?" she countered with the gentle teasing she had learned from him. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the rhythm of waves against shore, a natural music that belonged to neither of their worlds, and both of them simultaneously. "Eli," Mira said finally, her voice soft but clear. "When I first arrived, I asked you a question I didn't understand." "What question was that?" "I asked, what is love?" She turned to face him, her large eyes reflecting starlight. "I've studied human definitions, observed countless interactions, even mapped the neurochemical responses. But I still don't have a complete answer." Eli smiled and reached for the small flute he always carried. Without speaking, he began to play, not the complex compositions they had created together, but the very first melody he had taught her. Simple, pure, and true. The notes rose between them, carrying meaning no telepathy could convey, no words could capture. Mira closed her eyes, feeling the vibrations resonate through her transformed consciousness. When the last note faded, she opened her eyes to find Eli watching her with an expression that answered her question more completely than any definition could. "Oh," she said simply, "I understand now." Above them, stars wheeled in ancient patterns, the same stars that shone on both their worlds. Different eyes gazed upon them, different minds interpreted their significance, different hearts felt their beauty, but the light that reached them was the same. The alien girl had asked, "What is love?" He had answered without words, and 2 worlds would never be the same again.